Discover the incredible moment a CEO transforms a single mother's life with just $50 on a flight. Sarah slumped in her cramped economy seat, the faint hum of flight engines barely drowning out her racing thoughts. The grocery store uniform clung to her, a constant reminder of the hours she just logged and the minimal pay that trickled in. Her 10-year-old son Jake was miles away, likely dreaming of a life not confined to juggling bills and repacking leftovers. The snub from her promotion application echoed relentlessly in her mind, her lack of experience highlighted like a neon sign, while her friends and coworkers hadn't tasted that bitter rejection. She glanced furtively toward first class, where well-dressed travelers floated in luxury, seemingly unaware of the struggles that consumed her life. Envy simmered in her chest, a stark contrast to her exhausting routine, where every week felt like an uphill battle. Her thoughts spiraled as the flight hit turbulence, the turbulence of her own life crashing around her. Despite her efforts, late nights at the grocery store, early mornings at the cafe, she felt like she was treading water, barely keeping afloat. How long could she keep this up? Each moment seemed swallowed by insecurity, her self-doubt growing sharper every day as she confronted the economic reality, stretching out before her like a horizon with no end. The fear that Jake would face the same struggles haunted her. Would her endless sacrifices add up, or would she become another statistic in a world that often failed to notice them? Just then, a sudden jerk of the plane's descent startled her, sending a cup of soda careening through the aisle. It splashed across the crisp white shirt of a man lounging in first class, Michael, the CEO who thrived atop a mountain of corporate success. Their gazes locked, a momentary jolt racing through her. Mortification arose from the pit of her stomach, but she swallowed it down. She was used to apologizing for her own readiness to spill her life's complications onto others. She had no right to disrupt the reserve of that stranger. Yet amidst her embarrassment, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, an understanding of struggle she hadn't anticipated. "Sorry about that," she mumbled, wiping her hands on her uniform, a futile attempt to wipe away her own chaos. Michael chuckled softly, disbelief mingling with intrigue. "No problem at all." The conversation stumbled awkwardly forward before opening the door to truths neither had expected. She shared snippets of her life, the sense of dread that came with each job application. With every word, she felt a hollowness stirring next to Michael's privileged existence as he remained fascinated yet unaware of the burdens that weighed heavily on her shoulders. Before she could dismiss it, he reached into his pocket, producing a crisp $50 bill. "Here," he said, his tone earnest, "just a little something to lighten the load." The gesture pierced her like an unexpected blow. Her instincts screamed to refuse, to cling to her pride, and yet deep down, the softness of compassion tempted her. Could she accept help without feeling like a failure? The internal struggle tore her apart, every thread of independence woven tightly against the weave of urgency, knitting itself into her very being. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. She allowed the money to slip through her fingers, filled with a mix of shame and an overwhelming terminus of possibilities. In accepting it, she was signing on to something beyond survival. Wasn't she ready to invest in herself? That night, tossing and turning in her bed, the weight of her decision enveloped her, a cascade of thoughts sprinting through every nerve. What if that $50 turned into something more? Thoughts raced as she envisioned taking a course, learning something new that could elevate her stagnant reality. The realization of where she stood now was tangled with the hope of where she might go next. But that hope came precariously dressed in uncertainty, just like the looming darkness that threatened to engulf her future. As her heart raced with newfound purpose, a sense of impending doom lingered in her veins, foretelling the significance of the decisions still lying ahead. Little did she know that connection forged in flight would lead her to a panel discussion on struggles echoing in countless voices like hers, forever altered by the brief interaction on a turbulent flight. Just as she prepared to make her mark in front of an audience that had little idea who she was, the lights flickered ominously, summoning an unprecedented weight of tension that left her internal narrative hanging in midair. What awaited as she stepped into the spotlight? Would her story soar, or would it descend into shadow? The answer hung just out of reach, shrouded in the unknown. The stage loomed before Sarah like a vast ocean, its lights casting sprawling shadows that danced across a floor polished to a gleam. She stood backstage, heart pounding in a symphony of nerves and aspirations, each beat counting down to her moment of truth. The audience's murmurs resonated through the curtain, amplifying her insecurities. What did she have to say that could possibly matter? As she clenched her fists, those $50 fluttered in her mind like a paper airplane, a reminder of the small investment that could shift her trajectory forever. With a deep breath, she pushed aside her fears, allowing the memory of Michael's unexpected kindness to bolster her resolve. She found herself thinking not the generous gesture, but of the realization it had sparked within her, a flicker of bravery that whispered she was entitled to something more than her current situation. She was not just an employee in a uniform, she was a mother, a dreamer. In that instant, she pictured Jake's face, the boy who deserved a mother willing to fight for a better life. As the announcer's voice crackled through the speakers, Sarah felt the weight of collective stories hanging in the air. She was not alone in her struggles. These faces, filled with a mix of curiosity and empathy, mirrored her own fears. The thought steadied her. She was there to share her story, not just for herself, but for those who felt silenced by circumstances. When it finally came time for her to step onto the stage, the lights struck her like beams of revelation. The audience quieted, and for a brief moment, uncertainty froze her in place. Then she squared her shoulders and stepped out into the glow, gripping the edges of the podium like a lifeline. "Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah," she started, her voice steady yet vulnerable, seeking connectivity. "I used to believe that my life was a series of unfortunate events, a routine of barely scraping by. Just a few days ago, I was sitting in economy class, feeling stuck and unimportant. An unexpected encounter with a stranger, someone who, by all definitions, should have been worlds away from me, changed how I see my struggle." She felt the warmth of their focus press upon her, and she dove deeper into the story of her journey, the long hours, the rejection, the crippling doubt that had shadowed her decisions. Each detail unfolded like a chapter ripped from a book that had felt too heavy to hold. The crowd listened, rapt and engaged, as if she was recounting a narrative they themselves had lived. With every word, Sarah unearthed a new layer of herself, revealing dreams long buried beneath the weight of necessity. She spoke of aspirations untarnished by practicality, of the decision to invest not only in education, but in her belief that she should strive for more. That acceptance of the $5 had ignited something within her. "Sometimes we need to allow ourselves to be helped, to accept kindness without shame," she declared, her heart racing as she poured her truth into the space surrounding her. By the time she approached the conclusion, she could feel a shift, not just within herself, but in the atmosphere around her. "We're all fighting our own battles, but we owe it to ourselves and to those we love to push through the fear. So I stand here not just as a single mother, but as a warrior ready to claim her story." The applause erupted, echoing as her chest swelled with emotions, relief, empowerment, determination. Yet even amid the applause, a voice deep within questioned if that was enough. What awaited her after this moment? Walking off the stage and into the embrace. of a community of strangers who felt familiar was a whirlwind of confusion and exhilaration. But in that exhilaration, new questions unfurled like flowers seeking light. Would this conversation spur the changes she so desperately desired? Did she have the strength to follow through on her newfound courage? The answers hung in the air, tantalizing and elusive, as she exited into a world that had just begun to unfold. What would happen when she stepped beyond the aura of newfound confidence and confronted the reality awaiting her? A flicker of anxiety bubbled up alongside her fervor, weaving into her thoughts. Was stepping into the spotlight merely the beginning of a more daunting journey yet to come? Stepping off the stage felt like stepping into an unknown realm, a world both thrilling and terrifying. As the applause faded into a distant memory, Sarah's heart beat with an erratic rhythm, urging her to embrace the changes ignited within her. The exhilaration of sharing her truth clashed with a sudden weight of responsibility. What now? The venue around her buzzed with conversation, a tapestry of stories waiting to be intertwined with her own. She swayed slightly, feeling both connected to this sea of humanity and utterly isolated in her thoughts. What had she truly accomplished? The stage had been her moment, but how would it translate to her everyday life filled with old habits and fears? The thought pressed against her mind, shrouding her in doubt. With a determined inhale, Sarah wandered toward a quieter corner. There, she scrolled through her phone, reading the messages spurred by her speech. Familiar names filled her screen. Friends, family, even distant acquaintances offered words of support. But as she read each message, her optimism started to crack. They were kind, yes, encouraging even, but they also felt hollow, like compliments for a performance rather than acknowledgement of a substantial change. "Hey," Michael's voice broke her reverie. He sidled up beside her, a warm smile breaking through the haze of her uncertainty. "You were incredible out there." "Thanks, Michael," she managed, forcing the corners of her mouth to lift. But now what? They seemed so moved, but does this really lead to a change in my life? A veil of understanding crossed his face. That's the tricky part, isn't it? Inspiring others can feel easier than inspiring ourselves. He leaned closer, his expression earnest. "Have you considered what steps you want to take next, or how to leverage this energy for your goals?" His words lit a spark within her. Real growth wasn't going to happen just because she had shaken free from her restraints for a moment. It would demand careful planning and unyielding effort. "Maybe I could go back to school," she said slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. "Or perhaps I can start something, a blog or a project, something that reflects what I believe." "Absolutely. You could share your insights and experiences with a wider audience," Michael encouraged, his eyes sparkling with genuine interest. "Take it beyond a moment." That perspective resonated with her, reframing the significance of her speech as more than a fleeting encounter. It could be a launch pad, a chance to build a bridge to where she wanted to go. "But how?" she whispered, the enormity of the task inching closer. "I don't know where to start." "Identify where you're passionate. That's your starting line. Then break it down from there, one step at a time." His confidence was infectious, yet a gnawing fear remained. Could she follow through? Would the thrill she felt tonight fade as life's pace resumed? Sarah's thoughts spiraled as she pondered the logistics. Time constraints, financial commitments, fears of failure creeping in like shadows. But for once, instead of retreating, she embraced a flicker of determination. Maybe tonight had tipped her world, but she had to fight to maintain that balance. "I'll do it," she proclaimed softly, more for herself than for Michael. "I'll figure it out. I owe it to Jake and to myself." She felt a surge of ambition wash over her. While her mind churned with plans and possibilities, another question swelled in her heart. What if the path she chose would provoke pushback, doubts from those she have to prove wrong? As they chatted, mapping out rough ideas, she felt the reality of the journey ahead taking shape. Her posture straightened and her expression shifted as clarity emerged amidst the chaos. "Michael," she said suddenly, a mixture of gratitude and urgency in her tone, "could you help me find resources, maybe connections? I feel ready, but I need guidance." "Of course," he replied without hesitation, reinforcing the community she had just begun to harness. In that moment, she understood she was cultivating not just potential, but her future. But shadows of trepidation lurked at the edges of her vision. Would she find allies, or would she confront the doubts of those who thought her aspirations were folly? Her breath hitched as a wave of determination coursed through her, leaving her invigorated yet anxious. She had stepped into the light, but now she had to navigate the shadows that lay ahead. Would stepping into her ambitions reveal newfound strengths, or would it lay bare her vulnerabilities? Only time would tell. As the first hints of dawn slipped into her apartment, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, a notebook sprawled out before her, the pages filled with a swirl of ideas and half-formed concepts. The weight of ambition pressed down on her, both exhilarating and daunting, as slivers of sunlight slipped through the gaps in the curtains, illuminating the chaos of her thoughts. She held a pen with a trembling grip, mentally wrestling with the fear of failure that had stalked her for so long. Her excitement was tainted with the urgency of needing to keep this newfound momentum alive. The echoes of her speech still reverberated in her mind, each word an invitation to reshape her life. But where to begin? "Start with what you know," she muttered to herself, a mantra to alleviate the spirals of doubt. Determination flared in her chest, like a spark igniting a fuse, as her pen scratched against the paper. Her thoughts fell into a rhythm, and she began to write down her passions, essaying the delicate balance between longing and practicality. Health and wellness emerged as a constant in her reflections, her own battles with self-care juxtaposed to her desire to inspire others on similar paths. With sharp strokes of her pen, she jotted down potential topics: mindfulness, personal narratives, coping strategies, and even the occasional dose of humor to navigate the gravity of it all. In this moment, she found herself at an intersection. Her past whispers of self-doubt battled with the relentless current of hope surging through her veins. The thought of sharing her struggles, her triumphs, within a digital space pushed her to confront unresolved insecurities. Who would care about what she had to say? Would her efforts be deemed worthy? Those very questions echoed her childhood fears. She'd often felt like the overlooked daughter, the one striving for acknowledgement in a crowded room. She understood now that to share authentically was to invite vulnerability, yet it felt essential. It was a step toward validating not only her own experiences, but allowing others to feel seen too. The more she wrote, the clearer her vision became. It wasn't just about a blog. It was about creating a sanctuary where she and others could exchange their narratives, a place for discovery, encouragement, and ambition. She could establish a community that provided a lifeline for those struggling in silence, a haven for authenticity amid chaos. As the sun fully ascended, she caught sight of her reflection in the kitchen window. The resolve had begun to etch itself on her features. An idea took root and flourished. Sarah would host a series of online discussions, inviting speakers who resonated with her audience, people with stories that aligned with her journey. She envisioned a space not just for personal anecdotes, but one that thrived on collective empowerment. But her excitement quickly collided with anxiety. The logistics of arranging this endeavor loomed large. How would she reach out to potential speakers? Would anyone agree to share their time? What platforms could she use? And how would she promote engagement? Each question seemed more formidable than the last. After a brief moment of panic, she felt the flicker of her determined spirit. She would harness the resources Michael mentioned, research tools and strategies, maybe even start small to build momentum. One step at a time, she reminded herself. With renewed clarity, she initiated a swift search on her phone, her fingers typing a flurry of queries about creating a blog. Her phone buzzed with a response from Michael, a quick check-in. "How's the planning going?" She hesitated for a moment, then typed a stream of thoughts, including her idea about inviting guests to speak. Sounds incredible. Want to brainstorm particulars later? He texted back instantly. Sarah felt a surge, exhilarating warmth cascading through her as she read his words. She responded with enthusiasm, and together they set a time to refine her plans. But just as her pulse quickened at the thought of action, a shadow crawled up the back of her mind. She could almost hear the naysayers whispering doubts, those relentless voices urging her to reconsider the bold moves she was contemplating. Convincing herself that she was worthy of setting this into motion was only half the battle. As her heart synced to the rhythm of her ambition, another question surfaced, uninvited but persistent. How much resistance would she face, not only from others, but from herself as she embarked on this journey? This thought settled heavily on her, compressing her enthusiasm into a heavy breath. Would she be able to silence those inner critics, or would fear tighten its grip as she delved deeper into this new chapter? The groundwork was laid, yet the reality loomed. The tension between dream and doubt intertwined, keeping her on edge. As she prepared for the next steps, she felt both trepidation and exhilaration tingling in her fingertips. The time had come for her to confront not just public perception, but the shadow of her own limiting beliefs that could either empower or hinder her pursuit. Could she truly rise above her insecurities and forge a path toward her aspirations? Or would the weight of self-doubt pull her back into the familiar? The day after her brainstorming session with Michael arrived, weighed down by an amalgam of anticipation and anxiety. As Sarah sipped her lukewarm coffee, she knew she couldn't chicken out. Determination flickered within her, but the raw reality of execution loomed over her like a dense fog. The faint sounds of the city waking outside her window felt like a distant echo as she stared at her phone, a million questions spiraling through her mind. This was it, the beginning of something that had the potential to either lift her up or drag her down. She flipped through her notes, the ink representing her hopes and fears. Who do I want to reach? She mused. Her heart raced with each thought that bubbled to the surface. It was beyond health and wellness. It was about navigating the storm of life, a lifeline that could tether shattered spirits to shores of resilience. But a nagging voice inside her nudged her towards caution. What if people turned away? What if no one engaged? Panic threatened to suffocate her fledgling enthusiasm. Taking a deep breath, Sarah decided she needed to face her fears head on. Her first move was to reach out to some of the speakers she had in mind, people whose stories resonated with her own journey. It felt terrifying yet exhilarating. She crafted a message, her fingers dancing anxiously across the keyboard. Hi, name. I'm working on a digital space, focusing on health and wellness, where we can share our stories and empower others. Her heart thudded her chest as she pressed send. Each message was a thread weaving her aspirations, yet each felt like a tentative step on a tightrope. The responses trickled in slowly. One yes, a couple of maybes, and of course, a few outright rejections. Each reply felt like a wave, some warming her hopes, while others threatened to pull her under. With each interaction, she fortified her resolve. She wasn't just collecting opinions, she was forging relationships, building connections that could help others navigate their own paths. As the days turned into a week, she found herself immersed in the details of platform selection and promoting her fledgling brand. The technical side overwhelmed her, but she tackled each small task with renewed focus. She designed the website layout that would house her blog and discussion panels, each selection painstakingly deliberate to create an inviting space. But beneath the surface of her endeavors, doubts continued to swirl. Moments alone in her apartment made her question if she was indeed capable of orchestrating something meaningful. Bit by bit, the shadow of insecurity crept back, bringing with it the familiar imposter syndrome that haunted her. What am I doing? Who am I to think I can host these discussions? During one of her self-doubting spirals, a text from Michael popped up, reminding her of their scheduled meeting. "Let's make this idea as powerful as it can be," he wrote, and she felt a flicker of hope reignite. At the cafe, surrounded by the aroma of brewed coffee and muffled conversations, their discussions began to flow. He asked about her vision, encouraging her to delve deeper into the purpose behind her project. The gentle push to explore her motivations cracked something open within her, a realization that her own journey and struggles were enough. Unwavering authenticity would shine brighter than polished perfection. "Remember," Michael advised, "your vulnerability is your strength." His words shifted her perspective, and rather than seeing them as mere confessions, she began viewing her stories as pathways for others to feel less isolated. Those stories could empower not only her, but countless others facing similar battles. By the time they parted ways, a surge of determinism coursed through Sarah. Each step she was taking was inching her closer to a vision she had almost persuaded herself to relinquish. She now understood that her worthiness wasn't defined by others' responses, but by her willingness to show up for herself. Gathering her notes as she headed back to her apartment, a new thought crept into her mind. A nagging voice that didn't come from a dark corner of doubt, but from a place of curiosity. What would happen if she infused her authentic self more boldly into her content? What new stories awaited her, just beyond the horizon of her current fears? That night, as she sat in her kitchen surrounded by scattered pages, she felt her heart race again, not from fear, but from the exhilaration of a realization. The journey ahead promised not just growth, but a discovery of the depth of self. Her own voice, yet another revelation waiting to manifest. With her pen poised to write once more, Sarah's thoughts erupted. What was the deeper story she hadn't yet dared to explore? And as that question floated in the air, she sensed the gears turning, bracing for the heights and valleys of this evolving path. What if, amidst her exploration, she found an unexpected challenge that forced her to confront an even deeper insecurity, one she had kept buried for far too long? With renewed resolve, Sarah awoke the next morning with a sense of purpose that felt almost tangible. The tenacity she had cultivated wasn't merely a fleeting emotion. It was a driving force, urging her to dive deeper into her true self. Yet, as invigorating as this epiphany was, she couldn't shake the skepticism brewing within her, echoing the question, could she really be the catalyst for change she sought to embody? On her morning walk, the crisp air wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, allowing her to reflect on her next moves. She envisioned a more authentic narrative, stories told not through the glossy facade of success, but through the grit and vulnerability of real life. Each step pulsated with possibility, and she began to map out her ideas in her mind, imagining how to twist and weave her experiences together to create a fabric of collective resilience. Back in her apartment, she pulled out her laptop, flipping open a new document to capture her thoughts. What if, she typed, I shared my own struggles and triumphs alongside those of others? The words flowed as she wrote about the moments that had shaped her, the failures that taught her, and the victories that fueled her passion. This felt right, raw, uncompromisingly honest, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was the bridge between her and the audience she hoped to engage. As the days slipped by, Sarah's collection of drafts transformed. She shared snippets on social media, inviting feedback and encouraging others to share their own stories. Though trepidation still lingered, what if no one resonated? The exchange of narratives sparked a dialogue she hadn't anticipated. Supportive comments poured in, offering validation and encouragement like kindling to the fire burning within her. But amidst the growing warmth, she began to notice an insidious feeling creeping back, the fear of exposure. Could revealing her vulnerabilities lead to genuine connections, or would it expose her to criticism and ridicule? Each time the cursor blinked at the end of a sentence, she hesitated, a dance between courage and self-doubt that played out with each keystroke. Then came a message that jolted her from her thoughts. A screenshot of a heartfelt comment popped up in her notifications. It read, "Your words resonate with me. Thank you for being brave enough to share." That one line carried weight, anchoring her amidst the chaos of doubt. Could her journey indeed illuminate the paths of others, creating ripples of connection, healing, and understanding? Encouraged, she reached out to a couple of local community organizations, expressing interest in hosting a workshop to build on her digital platform. All of this felt thrilling, yet daunting. Suddenly, she wasn't just crafting content. She was stepping into a space that required her to be more than a voice behind a screen. Now she needed to be present, to engage face to face, and to confront her fear of inadequacy head on. But as she arranged the logistics for these sessions, another layer of fear materialized. What if she faltered in front of her audience? What if they saw through her and her perceived competence like a glass facade? Yet, just as she was about to succumb to these self-defeating thoughts, she recalled Michael's voice. Your vulnerability is your strength. Now she was at a crossroads. Choose the safety of anonymity behind her screen, or step fully into the light, exposing her vulnerabilities for the world to see. With a lump forming in her throat, Sarah realized this might be the very challenge she had been subconsciously avoiding. The need to confront her self-worth on a stage, where failure was possible, but so was fulfillment. That evening, as she prepared for bed, she kept replaying what it would mean to show up, raw and real. She sensed the pivotal nature of this decision. It was shifting her narrative from one of self-doubt to one of empowerment. The moment of reckoning approached, yet even in the silence of her room, the question echoed in her mind with growing urgency. Would she embrace this challenge that hovered so close? Would she stand strong amidst the fear, ready to capture not only her journey, but to empower others to navigate theirs? As sleep eluded her, she felt the pulse of excitement mingling with trepidation. She needed to prepare for an announcement that would elevate the stakes. More than just a personal venture, this was an opportunity to create a real community of shared strength. With tomorrow just a breath away, Sarah knew she was on the precipice of a pivotal moment, the kind that could redefine not only her professional journey, but also her inner sense of self-worth. What awaited her when she faced the truth of her own vulnerability in front of a live audience? As dawn broke, a soft light spilled into Sarah's apartment, illuminating her cluttered desk where her laptop lay open. Anxiety swirled inside her, but today was not just another day. It was the day she would reveal her plans. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that the very act of moving forward was a testament to her growth. After a quick breakfast, she sat down to finalize her message. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What if her audience found her suggestions trivial? What if her story felt disconnected? Each thought hit her like a crashing wave, threatening to pull her under. Yet she clung fiercely to the notion that every time she spoke her truth, she drew closer to the woman she wanted to be. With steady resolve, she began typing her announcement on social media. She wanted to express her intent to lead workshops that fostered genuine connection, spaces where vulnerability was met with compassion. Editing and rewriting several times, she finally crafted a message that resonated deeply with her. Her pulse quickened, tension building as she clicked post. An echoing silence followed before a wave of notifications burst forth. Comments flooded in, initially overwhelming her senses. Each like and encouraging remark felt like a buoy in an ocean of doubt, buoying her spirit. But beneath the excitement lurked another wave of insecurity. Who was she to lead others? What could she offer that hadn't been said before? Determined not to succumb to these thoughts, Sarah stepped outside for a quick walk. She needed to ground herself in the reality of this moment. The streets of her neighborhood buzzed with life, much like her spirit. As she walked, thoughts transformed into a plan. The workshops would be about more than sharing her story. They would be about creating a space for others to voice their own struggles. It was a two-way street, a chance for collaboration, much like the dialogue that sparked in her online shares. Yet that spark ignited a new layer of tension. What if she designed these workshops, pouring her heart and effort into them, only to find the seats empty or filled with disinterested faces? The dread coiled tightly within her. This was no longer about just her journey. This was a risk that felt monumental. Later that evening, she joined a video call with the community organizations she had contacted. The representatives expressed enthusiasm, energized by her initiative. They shared their hopes for the workshops: healing, connection, empowerment. They saw in her the potential for transformation, and each nod of affirmation stoked the fire in Sarah's heart. Yet, amid the encouragement, she felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. Afterward, Sarah returned to her laptop, grappling with the enormity of what she was about to undertake. The real work lay ahead in the preparation. Could she facilitate an environment where others felt safe to share their challenges? The idea filled her with excitement, yet sent tremors of doubt through her core. That night, she lay in bed, lacking the peace she had hoped for. Questions danced in her mind, turning into a frenzied narrative that threatened to drown her ambitions. But then she felt a shift. Memories of Michael's affirming words seeped through the self-doubt. Your vulnerability is your strength. As dawn approached, she stirred with a renewed sense of clarity. Micromanaging her fears only stifled her growth. Today was a moment to carve out her space, to trust that showing up perfectly flawed would be enough. Each opportunity to connect with potential attendees could become a myriad of strengths, her own and theirs, woven together. And as the day began, that singular question reverberated against her walls. How would she rise to meet the challenge of leading the workshop and embracing her own vulnerabilities, while inspiring others to share theirs? The clock ticked steadily towards the evening. Minutes swiftly passed, leading to another defining moment. Would Sarah step onto that stage of authenticity, or sidestep into the shadows of doubt? The whispers of fear grew louder as the time for her first workshop rapidly approached. The clock struck 6, and Sarah's heart raced as she prepared for the workshop. The evening sunlight streamed through her curtains, casting a warm glow that felt oddly juxtaposed with the chill of apprehension enveloping her. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down her shirt, a simple but polished choice. Despite the reflection of strength staring back at her, self-doubt lingered. What if she faltered? What if her voice wavered, or her words fell flat? A glance at the clock revealed time was slipping away. With each tick, the fear morphed from a whisper into a cacophony. She paced around her apartment, habits of distraction surfacing. She straightened the cushions, refolded her notes, and even considered rechecking her presentation slides for the 5th time. Yet each action only heightened her anxiety, a futile attempt to feel more prepared when all she really needed to do was trust herself. The drive to the venue was a blur, her mind racing ahead with scenarios, imagined conversations, faces of strangers turned skeptics, overwhelmed by her presence. The narrative she constructed was ruthless. Even if just one person felt discomfort during the workshop, it would be a monument to her failure. Each possibility elongated the path to where she was headed, amplifying her every anxiety. Once she arrived, the sight of the venue offered a brief reprieve. The community center was vibrant, filled with people mingling and the echoes of laughter punctuating the air. Yet, amidst the playful chatter and animated conversations, Sarah felt an isolation that thrummed with intensity. It struck her that she was an outsider in this realm of familiarity. Her breath quickened. Perhaps this wasn't meant for her after all. As she stepped inside the main room, the warmth from the soft lights and welcoming faces did little to settle her nerves. The attendees slowly filled the seats. Each arrival felt like a testament to the risk she had taken. Yet the swelling crowd triggered a wave of panic. She imagined them sizing her up. Who was this woman with a vision, daring to claim the space for herself? Taking a deep breath, she focused on the vision she carried for this workshop. The goal wasn't to impress, but to connect, to weave a tapestry of shared experiences. Without realizing it, she took a step toward the podium, gripping its edges, grounding herself amidst the swell of uncertainty. She looked around, observing familiar yet new faces, mirroring the nervousness she felt. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was steadier than she had anticipated. She opened with a story, her story, vulnerable yet empowering. As she talked about her struggles, her fears, and her triumphs, she saw the attendees lean in, the tension, the room shifting. They listened not just to her words, but felt the weight of her honesty. With every sentence, Sarah noticed hesitation dissolve, replaced by nods of recognition. But as she delved deeper into her narrative, she stumbles upon a revelation about herself. It wasn't just her journey that mattered, it was their voices too. She was not alone in this. The realization ignited a flame within her, surpassing the fear that had shackled her for so long. As she transitioned into an interactive segment, she posed questions that invited their reflections, sparking a dialogue that felt rich with authenticity. Sarah found herself reveling in the moments of connection, the laughter shared, and the stories exchanged. Yet the truth lingered on the edges of her awareness. The evening would not end without confrontation. Could she handle the looming question of her perceived inadequacies? As the workshop progressed, she felt the moment approaching, a wave of self-revelation mingling with the whispers of that familiar fear. Would she fully embrace her role as a facilitator, or would subconscious echoes of insecurity pull her down? The challenge of not only leading others, but also trusting herself awaited just around the corner. The workshop buzzed with energy, but an unseen weight pressed against Sarah, daring her to confront her hidden vulnerabilities. It was then she realized that while she had taken steps into the light, shadows still lingered behind her. Would she stand firm, ready to break free from her lingering doubts, or retreat back into the shadows as fear urged her to do? The hour was ticking closer to the defining moment where transformation could either take root or flicker away. The interactive segment enveloped Sarah in a wave of authenticity. As she asked open-ended questions, a moment of vulnerability began to emerge within herself and her audience. She noticed a woman in the front row whose eyes sparkled with recognition as Sarah voiced feelings of inadequacy. It was a silent agreement, a confession shared across the unseen threads of connection binding them. How many of us have felt like imposters in our own lives? Sarah's voice rang out, clear and insistent. She scanned the room and was met with a sea of nodding heads. Each affirmative gesture tied a knot around her fears, binding them tighter as she realized she wasn't alone in this tumult. The shared vulnerability filled the space with a palpable energy, sparking responses that echoed through her mind. One woman spoke about her own hesitations, how she felt unqualified in her new job, how she often second-guessed herself in meetings. Sarah could feel the weight of her pain. It mirrored her own. As each story unfolded, they created an intricate tapestry of shared experiences, showcasing their collective struggles while simultaneously dismantling individual fears. In that moment, the workshop transformed into a collective healing rather than a solo journey. Sarah began to weave in her own personal discoveries, the times she had turned away from opportunities because she believed she was unworthy, The narratives of the participants began to echo like a chorus, building momentum for what she realized was a shift not just for them, but for herself too. Here, in this space, she was learning that her authenticity was as valuable as the expertise she thought she lacked. Yet, beneath this newfound courage lurked a retreating shadow of self-doubt. A familiar narrative crept back. What if the energy waned? What if she tripped over her words, or worse, failed to provide them with what they sought? Anxiety rippled through her again. Would the moment of connection solidify, or would it unravel? What do we need to free ourselves from? Sarah asked, almost instinctively. The question hung in the air. As hands rose and voices rose in chorus, she felt a surge of empowerment flood her senses. She was guiding them towards an understanding that connected each person's fear with a thread of resilience. But this was a pivotal moment. A decision lay ahead. As participants shouted words of freedom and release, Sarah felt the trembling edge of her own insecurities crash against the shore of her emerging confidence. To truly lead, she realized, she must embrace the very shadow she wished to cast aside. Was she prepared to turn around and stare her fears in the face? Let's share not just what we want to release, but also what we are willing to embrace, she continued. And in that moment, she knew she was on the brink of a defining revelation. The crowd's energy surged once more, a tempest of shared desires and aspirations. Conversations erupted, filling the room with passion. They were seeking not just freedom, but a new identity, a chance to rise above their fears. Sarah paused, taking in the vibrant energy around her, daring to believe she was more than just a facilitator. The spark ignited a sense of possibility deep within her. She could be an agent of transformation. But the shadow of doubt loomed larger, casting uncertainty over this stark realization. What if she couldn't sustain this momentum? As she concluded the session, she sensed an anticipation trailing behind her. The evening's revelations awoke something important within her. Would she acknowledge her fears and work alongside them, or would she allow them to dictate her path? The workshop had served as a launching pad, yet the real journey awaited just beyond this moment. The applause erupted like a sudden storm, yet Sarah felt less exhilaration and more trepidation. The echo of gratitude rang through her, but a new voice whispered just beneath it. Now what? The curtain lifted a little more, but the next act remained unwritten, a blank space, ready for her to navigate. Could she face this new chapter with the same vulnerability she had learned to embrace together with others? The question lingered, a note of suspense hanging in the air as she stepped off the stage. A realization dawned. She had taken the first step toward empowerment, but what awaited her? As she delved deeper into this uncharted territory, the time to confront her limits was drawing close, and now she had to decide where her newfound confidence would lead her next. Weeks passed since Sarah's first workshop, and she found herself revisiting the exhilaration and anxiety of that day. Each follow-up workshop yielded more attendees, a growing community that hungered for connection and shared experiences. Her platform evolved beyond mere storytelling into a vibrant space for building resilience and fostering authenticity among individuals facing similar trials. On this particular evening, as Sarah meticulously arranged the seating and tested the microphone for the latest workshop, she noticed familiar faces lighting the room. The warm smiles of attendees, once strangers, now felt like validation of her growth and purpose. She no longer viewed these workshops solely as a daunting challenge. They had transformed into a life-affirming journey of discovery, not just for her, but for everyone present. The energy in the room swelled with anticipation. Stories exchanged in the previous sessions created bonds that reverberated through the air. When the last chair filled, Sarah stepped onto the stage, gripping the podium with a renewed sense of groundedness. The fierce tides of self-doubt that threatened to drown her were no longer the masters of her mind, but gasps of familiarity she was learning to navigate. "Hello, everyone," she began, looking out at the faces eager for connection. "Tonight, we're not just here to share our stories. We're here to confront the fears that hold us back. I stand before you as a fellow traveler on this winding path, determined to navigate our vulnerabilities together." As she spoke, Sarah could feel the anxious threads of her past slipping away moment by moment. It was an unfamiliar sensation, a deep-rooted confidence unfurling within her, competing with the insecurities that often resurfaced. Through unveiling her imperfections instead of masking them, she found power. The interactive segment blossomed with participation, voices rising in a chorus of shared fears and aspirations. People openly shared their anxieties, some hesitant at first, but gradually emboldened by the judgments-free environment Sarah had fostered. There was strength in their collective vulnerability. They nourished each other's courage with every honest exchange. Gripping the microphone, Sarah initiated a reflective exercise, urging participants to confront their limiting beliefs. She shared her own, the demons of self-doubt and fear that once had consumed her. The personal revelation reverberated through the audience, leading to an unexpected outpouring of experiences. Hands shot up as everyone chimed in, eager to voice their struggles. Towards the end of the evening, Sarah encouraged everyone to commit to their goals, to identify a tangible step they could take in defiance of their fears. The room buzzed with fervent discussions and eager catchphrases such as "Together we rise" and "Let's take back our narratives." The applause was thunderous when the session ended, echoing like a battle cry for transformation. Yet this time, Sarah felt less like a performer on stage and more like a leader among peers. It was less about demonstrating her worth and more about sharing a space where everyone, including herself, could thrive with authenticity. In the days that followed, she received messages from participants expressing gratitude for the impact of the workshops. Their stories of personal growth reaffirmed that she had instigated something far larger than herself, a community of resilience rooted in shared struggles. One evening, while reviewing feedback from attendees, a thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. Sarah decided to compile the transformative experiences shared in her workshops into a digital anthology, aptly titled Voices of Resilience. It would include stories of growth from participants, interspersed with her reflections and insights. This would be her contribution to a world often overshadowed by silence. As she began drafting the anthology, she marveled at the depth of her journey. The acknowledgement of her vulnerabilities was no longer a source of shame. It had become a beacon. Her transformation from uncertainty to leadership mirrored the stories of those she had engaged with, a testament to the power of shared authenticity. The moment of realization settled in, she had woven her purpose through this ever-expanding community. The identity she had crafted was not solely as a facilitator and storyteller, but became a symbol of courage finding its voice amidst noise. With each word inscribed into the anthology, she solidified her position as an advocate for resilience, welcoming everyone into this ongoing narrative. In this evolution, Sarah didn't merely achieve professional recognition, she embraced personal fulfillment. The insecurities that once clouded her confidence had transformed into stepping stones, each a reminder of growth and courage. As her anthology took shape, Sarah smiled, feeling secure in her growth. She was no longer just a single mother with aspirations. She had become a proud leader, an advocate for authenticity. Through each workshop, every shared story, and the eventual digital anthology, she proved to herself that true transformation lies not in perfection, but in the unwavering journey towards embracing one's truth. This was it. She had conquered herself, demonstrated resilience, and established a solid foundation for her aspirations. The world was wide open before her, not as a realm of limitations, but as a canvas where she could leave her mark, guiding others to unveil their own stories. As she prepared to unveil her digital anthology, she took a deep breath, knowing her transformation continued. This was a powerful moment, a celebration of both personal growth and shared humanity. The stage was set for the next act, and Sarah was ready to embrace the journey ahead. If you connect with Sarah's story, it's crucial to show your support for this channel. Subscribe immediately to not miss the next exclusive emotional journeys. Leave a like now to fuel this powerful community. Comment your insights and reflections on Sarah's transformation. Share this now with at least 5 friends who need to witness this inspiring story. You need to take action. Don't wait even one more second.